Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. I had a few requests to make this tutorial on importing dependencies and exporting jar files in Java, so here it is. I'm going to make a quick program here to demonstrate how to import dependencies using GSON library to parse embedded JSON objects, and then I'm going to export it to a jar file. So you can see I'm in IntelliJ and I've created a basic Hello World program. So let's first describe what a JSON object is. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And at its core, it's actually a pretty simple concept. We have squiggly brackets to indicate the beginning and end of an object. And inside, we have property and value pairs. So the values, as you can see here, can also be objects themselves. So here, the address property has an object that is representing it that includes street, number, and city. You can also have arrays and other constructs, but for our example, we're just going to keep it as a simple object. So you can see here that this is, in fact, an embedded object, meaning that address is itself another object. So we're going to see how we can use a dependency to capture this in Java. So first, you can see that I've created two classes, one called person and one called address. So let's start with address. So you can see that we have a basic class here that has a string, street, a number, and a city. And there is a basic constructor that we can create an address out of, and basic getters and setters. For person, we have, again, a constructor containing a name, an age, and also an address, which itself is an object. So here, again, we have the getters and setters for those. I want you to note that we can set an address by passing in an address object. So this is attached to this .address. All right, so I've also overwritten the toString, and I'm just printing out this. I'm this.name, and then I'm this.age, and then the address, street address to go along with it. I should probably add a few more things here, but this will give us the basic idea of how this will work. All right, so let's begin by creating a string that represents our person object. All right, so here is our basic person object, which follows the schema here that you see. We have a name, we have an age, we have an address. The address itself is also an object that contains a street, a number, and a city. And so here is the end of that first object, and then the second squiggly bracket is the end of our whole object. So what we want to do is actually translate this into a person with an address. All right, so we are going to import this dependency called GSON. So if we go over to File and Project Structure, we'll see that under Libraries, currently we have nothing that is imported into our libraries. So I'm just going to go from Maven. So we are searching the Maven repository, which is an online repository. So look at it as a bunch of extensions or libraries that other people have written that we can actually use. So I'm going to look up GSON, and I think there's going to be several repositories that have GSON there. So I'm just going to pick the one that shows up for me. So I'm just going to skip down a little bit, and I'm actually going to use this one from Google. So I'm just going to download it to a folder, export lib, and I'm going to keep all the transitive dependencies, and I think that's okay. So I'm just going to click OK here, and I'm going to go OK. And you can see that we now have this library that we can use. I'm just going to click through and go OK. And so now we can use this JSON object. So JSON is this class that will help us to parse this JSON object. So we'll just call it JSON is equal to, and then new JSON. Okay, so now we can use everything that's inside. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is parse the first level. So we're going to say person P is going to be equal to this JSON, and then there is this method called from JSON, and from JSON, we need to specify what the input string is. So we're going to pass in the JSON variable here, and then we're going to also specify the class. So this is going to be the person.class that we're going to attach it to. So attaching it to the person.class, we have a definition of the name, the age, and the address, but unfortunately the address is still in the form of a string, so we need to parse it to a different level. So here I want to get the address object. Okay, so there is this JSON object class as well, so we'll just call it JSON object, and this is from JSON.from JSON, and this time I'm going to take the JSON object and then parse it into a JSON object class. Okay, so this is just going to put it into its highest form, which is the JSON object. Okay, so you'll notice that JSON object is also coming from this JSON package that we're downloading. All right, so I'm then going to create an address out of this. So we'll say address is equal to, and then we'll do from JSON again, and this time we're going to take the JSON object and then .get, and there's going to be a member name associated with it, and the member name is address, so we're looking at this member right here. And then we are going to do address.class. We're going to specify the class that it's in. So now we're creating an address object out of this JSON object that's embedded in here. All right, so now that we have an address, we can do p.setAddress for the person, and we're just going to do the address that we've just parsed. And then now I think we're set. So just for our sake, let's just print out the p. All right, so the next thing we'll do is let's write it. Since we are going to export this later on, let's create a file, and I'm going to do new file and person.txt, and we're going to import this file by importing from Java IO, and we're going to make a print writer. Call it output file equals new print writer and the file. And we're going to, for now, just throw exception. Okay, and then finally we'll do an output file dot println, and we'll just print p to the file so we can actually see what's going on there. All right, so we'll do the output file dot close just to close up the file, and I just want to see after I export it what's going to happen to this file. All right, so let me just run this, make sure that this is working properly. Okay, so right now I am extracting this properly. I am calling the toString, which just prints out I'm this person's name, and then I'm 43, and then the street that they live on. So that is the way that it's being printed. We can also go to the out folder and take a look at, sorry, not the out folder. We can take a look at the root of the application, and we can see person.txt. So it's printed out okay as well. All right, so the next thing we want to do is let's export this program. So let's say I'm pretty happy with this, and I want to export it. So we will go to, again, project structure, and this time we'll go to artifacts. And so we want to export this as a jar file. So a jar file is basically a file that we can export, and we can just bring this file around, kind of like an executable that we can run on the Java virtual machine. So we're going to export a jar, and since we have some dependencies, I'm going to pick from modules with dependencies, and I need to find the main class. So for ours, the main class is just in main, but if you have some packages, then you will have to write the fully defined or fully qualified domain name down to the class. All right, so I'm going to extract to the target jar, and I'm going to click OK here. I'm going to include in the project build, because when I build a project, I want to have the jar exported as well. All right, so I'm going to click OK here. I'm going to go to build, and I'm going to build project. And once the project is built, we can see that on the out folder, we have our artifacts, and in here, we have our export.jar. Okay, so this is how we can run our code. So let's just jump into our terminal for 1 second, and I'm going to just very quickly take a look at where this is. So I'm going to go to this thing called, this folder called Java, and I'm in a project called export. So export has an out folder, which inside has artifacts, and then we have export jar, and then we have the export .jar. Okay, so I'm, instead of going in there, I'm actually going to copy this just so that you can see what's happening here. I'm going to copy this over to my user folder, and then let's just put it in Java, in the Java folder. So I'm actually bringing it outside of my project. /export.jar. Okay. So if we jump into our Java folder, we can see that we have our export.jar. And so this file is the one that we can just bring anywhere that has a Java virtual machine, and we can just run it. So in order for us to run it, we can do Java, and then we'll throw the flag -jar, and then we'll do the export.jar. Okay, so when we run this, you can see that it gets, it prints out what that person's name. And then if we check right now, you can see that it is outputting the person.txt file. Okay, so it's here because as we run the jar, we're running the code that says from this folder, I want to just put a person.txt file. So this just allows us to be able to run this code anywhere and run it kind of as a executable. Okay, so I hope that answers some of your questions. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. But I hope this was helpful. I'll see you guys in the next video.